Addiction in America is running rampant.
It's one of the country's top killers.
As the nation has seen a startling rise in overdoses.
But with an abundance of recovery options, in 2023 alone, there were still 112,000 people who died of a drug overdose. So what's going on?
It's because when they leave the other side of that program, there's very little support helping them stay sober.
Today we'll hear from 3 different changemakers working on the front lines of this problem.
I grew up thinking that this was bad people doing bad things, but I came to see that I didn't understand the problem.
People wonder how people made the choices that led them to where they are in life. I think it's better to say, if that was the choice somebody made, what were their options?
What are they doing differently to get results? And what can they teach us about building a pathway to recovery that actually works?
If we want to find better solutions, we're going to have to step outside of our comfort zones.
This is Stand Together Presents, stories, ideas, and advice from changemakers tackling our biggest challenges.
Okay, so the problems around addiction are complicated. But according to this foster mom turned social entrepreneur, it's the misinformation surrounding those struggling that is the biggest thing standing in the way of solving this problem.
Prior to becoming a foster mom, I thought it's bad people who use drugs, and it's really bad people who become addicted to them. And then we got a call one day, and it was for a little baby boy who needed a foster family because his mom had been using drugs while she was pregnant. And I could not understand how a mom who loved her child could possibly use drugs while she was pregnant. So I take him to his first visit with his mom, and there's a woman running towards me, weeping. And she starts kissing this little baby. I was so confused. If she wanted the baby this much, why wasn't that enough to overcome the addiction that she was struggling with? But the more that I got to know her, the more I realized this is about a hurting mother who is struggling with a really complex health crisis. I had to change from a concerned foster mom into an investigator of the war on drugs. I realized that the more trauma a person has in their life, the more likely they are to want to use drugs to numb those painful experiences. So why are we using criminalization, which is a system designed to create trauma, to try to fix a problem that is made worse by trauma?
Incarceration can seem like the easy answer, but the reality is far more complicated. In fact, only 10% of prisoners actually receive treatment while in custody. But what about traditional recovery programs outside of prison? Data shows that while individuals are 5 times less likely to die of an overdose during treatment, once they leave treatment, that reduced risk of death disappears entirely. So Becca Stevens created a new solution altogether.
So we're pulling up to the prison, Tennessee Women's Prison. It's just troubling to my heart knowing that so many of the women were victims long before they were criminals.
Thistle Farms is a 2-year female recovery center that builds financial independence for women survivors of prostitution, sex trafficking, and addiction. Becca says the key starts with dignity.
On average, the women that we serve are on the streets by the time they're 15 years old, so they don't have anything on the resume except blank spaces and then time served. Our actual program provides hundreds of thousands of hours in work, which means that individually people are becoming more self-sustaining because you need resources, you need advocates, and you need allies that can help you figure out a path where you get to choose. This is really what I want for my life.
By providing people with a steady job, safe housing, and supportive community, Thistle Farms helps the women tap into their full potential.
And that is really what freedom is about, is this idea that, I can take care of myself, I can make decisions not under the oppression of addiction.
And as of today, 75% of their graduates are still sober after 5 years. Which brings us to Scott, who has a unique solution that is spread all across the country.
Earlier in my recovery journey, I started getting into all these things, into climbing and triathlon. I didn't know it at the time, but I was actually finding new identity. Every time I crossed a finish line or stood on top of a mountain, I was actually a little more a climber than an addict.
Scott called his solution the Phoenix. It's a sober active community that uses the transformative power of fitness to help folks maintain sobriety.
Thinking about the way that we're approaching addiction nationally, we're doing overdose reversal drugs just to keep people from dying, right? And we're doing acute care treatment that keeps people sober for 30 days, but has really poor outcomes once they leave treatment. Because when you get into early recovery, you can feel really alone. You also have no sense of self.
And the Phoenix Active Lifestyle Focus has supported nearly 500,000 individuals all across the country.
With like every pedal stroke or every clean and jerk, you start to identify more as yourself. You can build on that and start to have these experiences that start to write the new chapter of your recovery story. This trip, we're gonna come to Moab. There'll be people tied into the climbing rope who've never climbed before. And you can almost see that fear that they're tying to the rope, they're looking up at the cliff. And if the climbing instructor or another Phoenix member can encourage them a little bit and they start to go up the wall, by the time they get to the top, all that negative self-talk that comes from the shame of addiction starts to melt away, and they start to see the possibility of who they can be in recovery. You're kind of struggling through that together, and in that struggle, you build a bond, and in those bonds, you find the support you need to stay sober.
Relapse rates after 3 months in conventional treatment are between 40 and 60%, but in the Phoenix community, that number drops to 17%.
The only way we're gonna get to them is if everybody who's here goes out and shares that recovery is possible.
So at the end of the day, according to these 3 experts, overcoming addiction in the US is possible. The key? Recovery solutions need to help people believe in their own intrinsic strength through a supportive community. If more programs like these were to exist, could they help change the statistics around recovery in America? Stand Together partners with changemakers tackling our biggest challenges. To see more stories, follow our channels. And to learn more about how you can partner with us, go to standtogether.org.